Teksoft Ventures. Very happy to have her with us. Before we get started, I want to take just a moment to show you the technology that we're using today. You should see on the right-hand side of your screen a control panel. You can slide this control panel open and close by clicking on the arrow in the upper left-hand corner. Click once to close, click again to open it back up. You can also type a question into the question box and click send, and we'll queue your questions up and get to as many as we have time for at the end of the session today. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Jan Konn. Jan is president of Teksoft Ventures and is responsible for the overall direction of the organization as well as working with clients to develop their strategic education programs. She's got over 22 years of experience working with ERP systems and 17 years in the adult learning arena. And Jan has led several ERP education projects, including global SAP rollouts for Fortune 500 companies, public sector organizations, and companies in the mid-market. We're always very happy to have Jan Konn with us. And with that, Jan, I'd like to turn the presentation and the speaking role over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let's go back a bit and let's talk about in the context of learning for an ERP solution. And if we look back into the 90s, which we all know is a long, long time ago, that we all designed and developed instructor-led training. Our tools were Microsoft Office products. It was death by PowerPoint, 200-300 PowerPoint slides, screenshots in them, and then Word documents to support exercises as well as some job aids and reference cards. And what we did is we really did the instructor-led training a fire hose routine. We looked at all the process changes, and sometimes we didn't even capture the process changes because organizational change management was still a bit in its infancy, and there were many organizations that did not believe that organizational change had a role within an ERP rollout. So 200 PowerPoint slides in a day with screenshots, and it took users a long time to grasp all these concepts of process changes as well as the tactical and how their jobs changed. So as an example, back then when we were delivering ERP training, we were looking at anywhere from 7 to 10 days to train a customer service worker for he or she to do their job. And today, that's been cut down quite a bit. And our average is anywhere from 3 to 5 days, depending on their processes. And the reason for that is it shouldn't be when they attend their first day of instructor-led training, that shouldn't be the first time that they're looking at process changes or they're looking at changes to their roles. And what's helping with that is this whole social media and the learning concept. So if we go to slide 4 here, social learning, and the definition is we're taking social media, which is electronic communications, that encourage a collaborative environment. And basically it's a tool set to share information, both upstream and downstream. And then we add the learning component to that, and we have an organized activity designed to increase knowledge or skill. So the new term here that truly, this is not bleeding edge, folks, but it's certainly cutting edge. It's not mainstream yet, but looking at how we can deploy social learning in an enterprise environment. Okay, so if we go to the next slide here, and let's talk about some facts here. Another term for social media or social learning is informal learning. We're not looking at taking that same customer service person and training him or her on how to do their entire job. We're really looking at pieces. You know, let's look at how we can, look at grabbing some pieces here and there, giving them some information so this informal learning takes place using the technology base in an innovative way to promote the knowledge transfer. Now, if you look at today, 66% of the people use social media in their personal lives, be it Facebook, be it LinkedIn, be it Twitter, so a lot of the 3 really major ones, and there's a whole lot of other type A applications as well. Yet 20% of the people use social media for work-related learning. Now, what I kind of liken that to is back in the mid to late 90s when the internet became somewhat commonplace, but there was a lot more activity from a B2C, from a business to customer perspective going on. You know, if you ordered Christmas gifts or holiday gifts from Toys R Us, and yet B2B took a lot more time for it, or business to business, using internet as a technology, took longer for that to go ahead and become commonplace within the workforce. This is kind of the same principle. The personal has already caught on like wildfire. I mean, there's like 30 billion bits of content or pieces of content that are posted each month on Facebook. And then we look at, by 2014, more than 50% of the workforce is going to be the millennials. Those are the folks born after 1981. And we have to understand that these folks are the ones that learn differently than the baby boomers. As an example, they're used to the video games. They're used to being challenged from visually, as well as all the different gaming and any type of assessments from a learning perspective. It has to be highly engaging. And they are certainly folks that understand the social media piece of this as well. So as we look and going into the future, there is a continuous shift from this formal instructor-led classroom learning to informal learning. And the shift is, it's becoming much more commonplace, but again, it is rather new from a business perspective. And the fact is, what's really driving this, like I said, is the workforce, the millennials, and this is something that really isn't going to go away. So the trends are is that, you know, we have 20% of the people now using social media for some work-related learning. That is going to grow dramatically within the next 2 to 3 years. Okay, so if we look at some goals and considerations here, we always have to look at, hey, okay, what's in it for the organization? Why should they even look at this? And it is to improve productivity, and we look at a collaborative environment that is very repeatable, but also can be cost-effective. So in a lot of this ERP type of learning or instructor-led, in many cases, there's ways to separate, you know, certain topics and just reinforce them within the instructor-led training. You can introduce these topics or these changes from an organizational impact perspective using the social learning. And again, just in bits and bytes. We're not looking at, you know, sitting folks in front of a computer and looking at a hour-long, hour-and-a-half-long e-learning class. We're really looking at it more from a smaller chunks of content. The other thing that this social learning does is it builds relationships. So if you're part of a global organization, you can really help to break down some silos here, as well as this content is accessible 24/7. If, for example, some of your users have a smartphone where the alerts can get downloaded, etc. Some of the things from a consideration standpoint is just like when you look at organizational change and selling the value, whether you're using social learning or not, you still have to sell the value of any type of learning, as well as getting your stakeholders, etc. No difference here. Your best business practices from a learning perspective all apply here. We're just changing the tools. And instead of doing all the learning at once, we're kind of spreading it out a bit and building on a knowledge base and building that base continuously. So one of the things is we don't want to force feed folks. You want folks to look at and be and understand and see some of the benefits by perhaps some of the other folks talking about what they've seen on some of the feeds or in the communities within, as an example, a group page on Facebook. You want to train your training staff or whoever is the stakeholder here for making sure that the content is applicable. You want to train them on the various tools. Always into making it fun. So as an example, we put together a video that just had some dogs digging and just using that as a bit of an antidote for finding help. How can we find help, and just driving that home. It has much more of an impact and it's kind of entertaining, much more of an impact than if you just had a link saying, hey, go here and look at this for help. It's a 40, 50-second video. And there's ways to deliver that content too, whether it's YouTube or a link through Facebook, etc. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. The other thing that you want to do is you want to build this community. And the community, again, has upstream and downstream type of communications. And you want to have your training staff that is an administrator to these different groups to ensure that the content is valid and the content is going in the right way. Not to really censor it, but to make sure that this all encourages the learning and the collaborative work environment. And again, it really gets down to selling the benefit, not forcing friendships, not force-feeding folks, and to really provide some guidelines around some of the content as well, to the users, and encouraging that really collaborative type of work environment. All right, if we go to the next slide, we have the 4 C's of social learning. And the thing and we're going to get into a couple of case studies here shortly, but is we have the content, which again is kind of your raw content that gets created. So as an example, you may have Harry who authors a topic, and the topic might be something like creating different sales order types. And we have Robbie who keys in on the deliverables when you look at the connection piece. So this is where your collaboration starts, and we have a connection, the initial connection, and then the collaboration kicks in when we have Sue who offers up some SMART goals or some metrics as it relates to maybe something that's changing, etc. And then perhaps the collaboration also gets spurred on by Jimmy who offers up a challenge. And all of this gets into answering, some debating, and you have you have to moderate the questions a bit, and that's really the administrator of this particular community. And really the intent here is to build or improve skills. The community is when we're collectively growing our knowledge within the business that helps us better do our jobs a bit better. So we have our timeline here as we look at connectedness. So this is the whole technology piece that is promoting the collaborative environment, and we're all striving for the better performance, which when you get to the community, we can go ahead and see the value of all this knowledge transfer, as well as the time savings in order to find information. And one of the things that you always ask when you start, if you're looking at deploying social media is, how are we going to do it? With what? The who and for what, as well as the when. I can't stress enough understanding what you want out of this, what your goals are, as well as some really, really good planning and delivering this more on a smaller scale or a pilot basis. All right, the options. I mean, we have LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, MySpace. I mean, we've got certainly a whole slew of different type of applications here. And if we look at some of the social media tools here on slide 9, we can use, and this could be, for example, a community here, this page here with all the different feeds into the different areas. So I could put on my Facebook page, or my Facebook becomes somewhat of a platform, the different YouTubes are downloading to my mobile devices, or any widgets, or Twitter. So there's a lot of different tools, and they certainly have different usage and value, and we'll talk about that as well a little bit later in the webinar. All right, so we have kind of an example here, and this is an example of Virgin Media, which is they're in the UK, and they're a based digital provider. This was not product focused. They didn't launch social media because they were launching a new product or they were launching a new IT solution. They were more launching it to kind of get into the social media and social learning to make sure that they stayed somewhat innovative, because they consider themselves an innovator within their industry. So what they did is they, as an example, is they had a community introducing kind of the technical behind Web 2.0, and they put out some different different media as it relates to some videos, and they launched this community. And what happened was is they opened it up to a select group of people. They did a pilot. They made sure that they controlled this, and they opened it up to a select group of people. But what happened was other folks were finding it from other divisions, and they were getting into the community and learning from it as well as asking questions, offering solutions. And what that did is it helped to decrease the email overloads. It certainly reduced content redundancy, because they didn't have all these different communities that had the same type of information in understanding Web 2.0. But it also helped to break down some silos that were more geographically or geographical constraints. So other divisions found it. It reduced redundancy, so they found some value in that. If I look at some of the training tips that they found when they deployed this, is that there are different training solutions. Again, I would not train someone, a customer service person, that would take 3 days to train. I would not use this as their sole method of training. There was some one-on-one training. There was some instructor-led training, lots of self-help with videos. Videos have gotten very inexpensive to build. And then the how-to communities helped with some business process. And what it did is it helped them break down the silos, and it helped them as certain business processes. This was pretty much the one version of the truth. So it led to more efficient processes. And the other thing that you get from this is you get a lot of continuous feedback. In many cases, in the old way of learning is we had a class, and we had the students evaluate the class, and then we didn't do really much evaluation after that or ask for enough feedback unless you did a real good job of focus groups and lessons learned, and maybe sent out some surveys via SurveyMonkey, etc. But you want, and social media or social learning really facilitates this, is feedback from your users, because you can learn a lot from them. And they want to use social learning if, in fact, they find valuable, meaning information. They don't want to be the 1 out of 6 folks that hasn't been on there and looked and not be in the know. The other thing is you always have to measure the success here. Another good story here is with IBM. Is they had identified their goals. They're innovative. They wanted to be technology enabled to get into learning. They wanted to use it to grow their leaders and provide some career guidance for their global employees. And what they did is they had these online learning communities. They appointed a subject matter expert responsible for the training content. No different than folks appointing super users for training content in an instructor-led or an e-learning environment. It requires ownership, and that is really critical to making sure that this is updated and there's meaningful information. So a couple of the value or the results is that the search time was reduced, and it accelerated the onboarding of new employees, and it tagged the subject matter experts and reinforced their goals of leadership development. And the employees, and what's real interesting about the story is what IBM found, and they really weren't kind of looking for that, is they were always used to a kind of a push learning. We're going to push it to you folks because it's what we think you need to learn. And what they found is that the learners, through social learning and through all the collaborative environments, said they started pulling information that was relevant for their jobs that necessarily wasn't pushed to them. So it helped to empower the employees, which created a lot more people interaction, and it went from, again, a push training to more of a pull, which really promoted the whole informal learning or this social learning. All right, so we have the good news and we always have the bad news, right? So at the risk of remaining nameless, I will not say the organization, but there was a Fortune 1000 company that created social learning around a new software application. They got a lot of interaction, but the issue was the management did not react favorably. They were concerned that a lot of activity was spent on this and taking focus away from the day jobs, and they lost control of the content. That's why you need ownership. You need to tag that subject matter expert. You need to clearly define your goals at the onset and socialize those with the management so they can understand what the value proposition is of this social learning. So you have to build a governance model, know your audience, and again, I can't stress enough planning ahead. Okay, some of the uses of Facebook. For example, I might create a group if I'm implementing a new ERP solution that might have to do with customer service folks. And I'm gonna let them go in there. They're gonna ask questions. We're gonna poll them. They might sync up some of the information with their smartphones, etc. So there's a lot of push information that happens. And then we go into YouTube, and there might be a welcome video from the president of the organization or from the vice president of customer service. We also record webinars and tips and tricks, and those would be housed here within YouTube, but then there would be your access from Facebook as an example. And then Twitter could help with the announcements. So let's say there's a new sales order. You announce that there's going to be 7 different sales order types within your new ERP system. It can replace email blasts, and we have different links to videos, etc. So again, accessing from their smartphone if they have one. And what they might ask then is, okay, I saw those 7 sales order types, but I didn't see a cash in advance sale. So that would be a question that one of your users would pose, and then that could help with your process improvement throughout the business rule definition or your configuration definition throughout your ERP project. So these folks, hey, they know what they're doing. They can also provide some valuable input even before training happens to help ensure that the business processes are covered. Okay, just a little, some tools to try. And again, there's certainly hundreds of them. But when you look at this, you apply your best practices just like you apply your best practices to instructor-led learning or e-learning. Build your OCM strategy, your organizational change strategy. Look at any type of a governance wrapper around this. Choose your tools, understand them, train your folks up on the tools, certify your folks, and run it in a pilot, and understand SMART goals-wise what you're going to get out of this. Make sure you measure it. Make sure there's some metrics here that you can measure against and make those results meaningful. When you look at the social media, it's the millennials that are certainly going to be driving this, and they learn very differently than the folks, the baby boomers. So the social media is something that certainly enables that type of learning. And I can't stress enough the preparation. And as an example, Virgin Media, what they did is they looked at a lot of email statistics. They looked at their folks that had a lot of followers on Twitter and Facebook, and what they recruited them as what they called super connectors. And they engaged them first, and they became the evangelists to this connecting in this social media because they truly believe in it, and that they felt that they could take it from a personal usage and make it work in a business environment. Okay?
Thanks very much, Jan. I know we have a few minutes here for questions and answers, and there are several that have come in from the audience, so I'm going to get to the first one, which is, have you ever used Yammer?
Yes, we've had. We actually use it in our organization, but we also used it at a client. And Yammer, for the folks, it's more of a Facebook design for enterprises. So it has a bit more of, whereas Facebook has more of a personal slant on it, Yammer I would consider would be the Facebook for businesses or enterprises. And the way we used it is during the rollout of an ERP project, we used it for communication and collaboration for that particular project. So it was project related, and you get, alerts just like you do on Facebook, and you would get into some of the different communities and in your areas of interest and see what's going on. Anywhere from meeting minutes to changes in process definition. There was a lot of information in there, and because the information was meaningful, you checked it all the time. If the information is just, a bunch of answers to questions and there's no collaboration, folks will have a tendency not to log in. Why? Because it's not useful to them.
Thanks very much, Jan. We have another question here from the audience. It says, what percentage of learning for an ERP implementation do you think would be ideal for social learning?
It depends on the culture of your organization and where, and how to assess that would be, are you folks into e-learning? How large is the audience constituency? But I'm a firm believer that when a user walks into a classroom in any ERP rollout, it should not be the first time they see the system. It should not be the first time they hear about the process changes. So I would say that if you look at it, at least for an ERP application, you should be able to cut down your instructor-led time anywhere from 20 to 25%. And again, that would be, you don't have to explain all the process changes. You would just reinforce them because they already see those and have seen them maybe once or twice on a YouTube or within Facebook or Yammer, etc.
Thank you, Jan. I think we have time for one more question here, and before we get to it, I'm going to launch an anonymous poll and just ask the audience members today if they'd like to meet with Teksoft via conference call or on-site meeting or web meeting about today's topic. And while we're having that poll open, Jan, the last question that we have here is concerning Facebook and Twitter. And the person is asking, do you recommend using private or secret Facebook and Twitter groups and tweets, or public?
I would use more the private, but again, it depends on the application, and it depends on how many folks in certain communities, et cetera, that you want to get involved in this.
Okay, thanks very much, Jan. And we are at 30 minutes. We're at our time limit for the day. So with that, I'm going to close the poll. I encourage you to reach out to Gary Remersma at TeksoftVentures.com. That's Gary.Remersma at TeksoftVentures.com. If you'd like a copy of today's web seminar, or if you had a question that we didn't have time to get to today, you can also reach Gary at 708-301-003 or TeksoftVentures.com. And with that, we thank Teksoft Ventures for putting on today's web seminar. Of course, we thank Jan Konn for being here to present to us today, and we thank all of you for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you at a future Teksoft Ventures webinar very soon. And with that, we wish everyone a great afternoon.